come out. I think I did cry.
You fished through what many would consider to be one of the golden periods of big carp fishing in the UK.
Give it the Bazil shout, and then I'd run around the complex trying to find someone to do photos. Oh, he had him eating out of his hand. They were fighting each other to get to his pellet. You know, John was secretive, you know. A few times I got in on a Saturday after him, unbeknown to me, that he'd filled it in further on down the margin. They were obviously known at the time to come in, lift rigs, and they'd call up with their packs. Even little John at the time had seen the big orange, and class the big orange at the time was uncatchable. And if he's saying that, you think, Christ, what chance have I got? Lewis screaming, beat him, Single, beat him! And as I've lifted it up, it's just gone, and it's hanging on the net.
John, it would be fair to say that you fished through what many would consider to be one of the golden periods of big carp fishing in the UK. When you look back across that time, do you think that the fish you caught and the album that you put together stands up with almost anything else?
Fish at that time are, yeah, different to these days. Obviously, there's a lot more big uns about. You know, my first 40 was Bazil, and pick of others you just didn't have. You know, you know as well as anyone, there wasn't the number of fish to target back then. So yeah, the type of fish, the quantities of fish for certain big uns is totally different to then. You know, you're going back, what, 25, 30 years when nearly 30 years when I first started fishing Yateley. And them fish have been around for a little time, but yeah, different style, different feeling when you caught them. So, you know, we love chasing big uns these days, and they mean everything still, but them ones have, had a certain standing, that kudos, whatever you like to call it, but within your peers and that, they were held high regard, and rightfully so.
Are you proud of the album that you put together in that era? Because I think a lot of people would have imagined that you were full-time.
Originally, I was working on the farm, so weekends only. I might get there mid-afternoon at best. Certainly the first year on the car park, I was slotting in. It was like, you turn up, there's 2 swims left, you weren't on the fish. You were going through the motions, really. Hoping that a swim might come free on a Saturday that you could drop in. I had more time after that. When I got out of the farm and got into the trade, it did open up and I did have more time. But by then I was already on the car park, and that place was different level anyway. You know, you could have 2 lifetimes and still not be enough. But the early days, weekends, and not living locally as well, all added to the difficulty. You know, most of the mates who were on there at the time were local. You know, getting down 2-3 evenings a week, even if they were weekenders, knowing what was going on, slipping bait in, keeping an eye on the fish. When you're turning up on a Friday afternoon, the lake was fairly full. You know, the other lakes, to be fair, weren't busy like the car park. So always had choices on sort of match cops in North Lake. But as anyone knows who's a weekender, unfortunately I'm not anymore by choice. You ain't going to get where you want to go week in, week out. And if an opportunity comes, you've got to be in the position to make the most of it, because it could be another year before you got that opportunity again.
Right, sorry to interrupt, but whilst I have your attention, I just want to talk about a couple of things. Firstly, would you please subscribe to our YouTube channel? We would massively appreciate it, and you will stay very much up to date with everything YouTube orientated that we do. Secondly, and as well as asking you for a little favour, we have a little something that might be of interest to you. If you click the link in description or scan the QR code on screen, you will be entitled to 50% off your first 3 months as a Sopography member. And as a Sopography member, you will get access to over 1,000 videos and several other member perks.
Did you ever feel a sense of frustration that you couldn't do the time that others were doing?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, 100%. You know, when you're going home, and back then, the early days, you know, there was a 7-day limit, but people were doing 6 nights, going home for one, fish through to a Saturday, go home, come back first thing Sunday, and then they'd be there till Saturday. If you were turning up on a Friday, you might have an opportunity to move on a Saturday. This is more car park, you know, the other lakes didn't really have full-timers on, so that wasn't so much of a issue. Most of the lads, when I fished, were either weekenders or just doing 1 or 2 nights. But, you know, you go slightly before a generation of Tail, Nige, Malin, you know, all them guys that were living on the ponds, you know, and clocking up the fish. Yeah, of course, you were a bit envious of having that time because the opportunities didn't come along, and at least you could make an opportunity by having time, whereas if you didn't have time, you were, you know, clutching at straws. My first carp bite took exactly just over a year, and really the amount of chances I had in that year fishing every weekend, apart from the depths of winter, you know, if I had 1 or 2 realistic opportunities, that was pushing it. So you learn a lot watching the people that were catching, but they were generally ones that had time. You know, little John, a prime example, he didn't have rods in the water very often, but he was there, he was waiting, he had to swim, you know, ready and just prime and prime and prime, and he'd only put a rod in when it was prime and he'd catch one straight away. But that was, yeah, taught me a lot. So yeah, it was valuable time, I suppose, because you were always learning. In hindsight, you know, did learn a lot, but it was difficult, yeah. Of course you got frustrated, yeah.
Tell me about what your early fishing had given you to prepare you for what was the ultimate big carp venue at the time, really, at the car park. What had you learned at the likes of Frampton that would have stood you in good stead to get that first bite?
Attention to detail. Obviously trying to get on fish always, but most of the lakes I'd fished up to there were weedy. You know, if you went, working in the shop, you get a lot of people turn up, or, you know, the lake's really weedy because they've grown up fishing barren pits, which a lot of the ways these days, a lot of fish coloured, they're not used to weed. Well, all the lakes I sort of grew up on generally had weed, so you learnt your trade, and yeah, you know, spot finding, observation, you know, tree climbing, that sort of thing. If you didn't have all them, you know, strings to your bow, you were going to struggle. So yeah, being able to fish that type of pit, again, relatively small lakes. It wasn't until, you know, more recent times that although Frampton was a big lake back in the day, but a lot of the time with the weed, shallowness, you were fishing at, you know, and you didn't have the gear there to fish super long range anyway, but it was more tiny areas to weed beds, find the fish, by obviously shows, but more hunting them out, you know, going through the undergrowth, getting up trees, searching them out. That if you could obviously find them, present baits to them, you had obviously putting yourself in the best situation, but carp was different level. Still never fished anywhere like it, and we're talking 20 years ago now when I sort of pulled off the car park. So yeah, but don't regret it really. Yeah, probably spent too long on it, but the ones that I did catch, albeit not the big 2, but I had 6 of the 9, so yeah, they're all prized in the album, and yeah, good memories. Good
Yeah, I mean, we're
memories.
going to talk about the car park in a bit more detail because it's still a era-defining lake, I think.
Hub of the year.
Was there, though, some regret that you turned your back on Frampton at a time when that lake was about to become something really special?
Well, that was forced on me, not by choice.
Okay.
So, yeah, let's just say we fell out with the guy that was running it, and he made it very difficult and got rid of me. So, yeah, it was on to pastures new by force. Long term, it might have done me a favour, really, you know, because otherwise I did love the place, you know, still do. And possibly could still be there now if it hadn't and not fished the places that I fished. So yeah, by forcing that means I've gone and fished otherwise and varied fishing. So yeah, and the benefit of a whole angling life, it might have been the best thing for it. But fate deals its hand, doesn't it? So, and hopefully I go back one day.